Who will be Kenya's next leader? President Uhuru Kenyatta is stepping down after a decade in power. Previous elections were marred by violence. Will it be different this time? And what's at stake in this vote? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Kenyans go to the polls on Tuesday to choose a new president, parliament, and county assemblies. Candidates held their final campaigns over the weekend, drawing large crowds. Some familiar faces are vying for the presidency, and their messages are similar: revive the economy, create jobs, and end corruption. Many voters, frustrated by corruption and skyrocketing prices, are calling for change. Harun Mutasa in Nairobi has more on who is running and what is at stake.
This is ugali, made from Kenyan staple unga or maize meal. Like most basics here, its price has gone up. And because of shortages, it's not easy to find.
If things continue this way, more businesses will close. We are facing a lot of challenges.
Corruption, foreign debt, rising inflation and unemployment are big election issues. And all candidates have promised to cushion households against the increasing cost of living. 4 politicians are running for the presidency: David Mwaure, a lawyer and pastor; George Wajakoya, a law professor; William Ruto, Kenya's deputy president; and Raila Odinga, a former prime minister. But opinion polls suggest there are 2 frontrunners. Ruto, the current deputy president, who describes himself as a hustler and hopes his rags to riches story will resonate with the poor. And Odinga, who's making his 5th bid for the top job. The veteran opposition leader is the son of Kenya's first vice president and enjoys the backing of current leader Uhuru Kenyatta. It's an election some analysts say will be hotly contested. Kikuyus, the largest ethnic group in Kenya, have no presidential favorites this time. However, both Ruto and Odinga have chosen Kikuyu running mates. In a country where ethnic voting blocks are important, a divided Kikuyu vote means this election could go either way. There are already claims and counterclaims of sabotage and vote rigging. More than 1,000 people died in the 2007 elections.
What happens with Kenya's geopolitical significance is that it just that tension sort of begins to shake up the stability of the Great Horn of Africa and the larger East Africa. So that's what, and there's a lot of international organizations that are based here. So Kenya is very strategic from a global perspective, and that's what the international community is looking at. The business community is basically just sitting on the edge of their seats trying to figure out whether this is going to go peacefully or not.
Unlike some previous votes, there's been less pre-election violence. Kenyans generally have confidence in the judiciary. Many hope if the results are disputed, candidates will resolve their differences in court and not the streets. Harun Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Nairobi.
Pre- and post-election violence in Kenya is rooted in ethnic tensions. Every vote since 1997 has been marred by unrest. More than 1,000 people were killed and 600,000 displaced in 2007 when rival candidates both claimed victory. 10 years later, dozens of people were killed when police clamped down on demonstrations. The opposition refused to accept the results, claiming vote rigging and fraud. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests. In London is Fergus Kell, a research analyst in the Africa program at Chatham House. And in Nairobi is Jacky Kwonyike, a lawyer and writer. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Jacky, let me start with you today. Elections in Kenya are often more about personalities and ethnic alliances. Are issues like the economy, the cost of living, and fighting corruption more front and center for voters this time than they were in the past?
I'd say yes, because the cost of living has first risen to an unbearable rate right now. Kenyans recently had the president pass a subsidy on maize flour. Here, a packet of maize flour was retailing for that would be $2 on your end, $2. And in Kenya, it was capped at $1 because people, the financial and economic sentiments, we are suffering, we are struggling. I'd say yes. It's taken more center stage, and then for the first time ever, the Frontrunners are not from the main, the what do you call it? The tribe that's seen as the main tribe for political leadership.
Fergus, how close is the race expected to be? Is it possible there could be a runoff? And have the candidates made commitments to respect the outcome?
So I think we are likely to see a close race. I think there are probably three likely potential outcomes, any of which is possible at this stage. That would be either an outright Raila Odinga win, an outright William Ruto win, in which case either of the candidates would need to receive over 50% of the vote. But the third option, as you say, is a runoff in which neither of the main candidate receives 50% of the vote. And that might be possible due to the two slightly more peripheral outsider candidates, David Moari and Professor Wakajoya. And so it is going to be a tight race. Polling suggests that it will be close, and it will be about the calculus of different regional strongholds and battleground states as well there. And in terms of commitment to respect the results, I think all the way back in March, we had both candidates speak at Chatham House here in London, in which they both pledged to respect the outcome of a free and fair election. And in more recent weeks, in the last week, both have agreed that they will shake hands or have tea together after the result is announced. And so I think the important message there is that they accept the results of a free and fair election. And if the election is deemed not to be free and fair, that they challenge that within the proper judicial framework of the Supreme Court.
Jackie, I saw you nodding along to some of what Fergus was saying, so I'm going to let you jump in and add whatever you'd like to add. But I also want to ask you, Kenya has a recent history of turbulent elections and violence after elections. Is there a concern this time that violence could play a part? And from your perspective, have precautions been taken to ensure that this doesn't happen?
I think I'd like to commend all the parties so far in how they've conducted themselves. For the first time in recent history, we've had a relatively violence-free campaign period. Normally, during campaign periods in Kenya, we'll have many strikes leading up to the election. We're used to office closures. People can't access the central business district. This year, we've not had any incidences of that. And I think it's because of some of the commitments that have been made by the political candidates. And as a Kenyan, I'm really grateful for that. We've been able to work almost all through the campaign period, not almost. And that's why I was nodding along. Their commitment towards shaking hands, it's because the general sentiment of Kenyans this time is, let's finish this and let's go back to work. Because truly, when I'll go back to cost of living, some people are literally living hand to mouth. So that's the assertion that everyone's on.
Jackie, you were mentioning just there the importance of this idea of having a handshake. And I actually want to talk for a second about a different handshake that made headlines a few years back. Raila Odinga has run for president 4 other times in the past, but this time he is backed by longtime political rival President Uhuru Kenyatta. And there was this very famous and public handshake between the two in 2018. How did the alliance between these two leaders come about, and how significant is it?
It was significant in that at that time there was work was there. Nothing had gone back to normal following the election period, because there were both sides were disgruntled. Remember, there was a ruling by the Supreme Court, rather a judgment, by the Supreme Court that nullified the elections the first time round. And so when the second elections were held, a number of the electorate, those who were supporting Raila Odinga, actually were urged to abstain from voting. So already, even though we went through the process a second time, the number of people who felt like their issues weren't addressed, who did not even turn up to vote, were sizable. So I think that handshake was so that Kenya could go on, so that it was for the people. And I think at that time it was very crucial. It brought peace, it brought normalcy. We needed it. And I know there's a lot of criticism around it, but here I'd be speaking as a Kenyan, someone whose daily life had been affected and would be affected if it had not been resolved. The handshake was crucial for returning us to normalcy and just for government business to go on, for daily business to go on, for our lives to move on. Because I notice we tend to focus on the higher stakes in politics and forget the people who are actually affected, the electorate.
Fergus, the alliance between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta basically sidelined Kenyatta's deputy, William Ruto, who is running. What led to the fallout between Kenyatta and Ruto?
It's unclear what the precise reasons are for the fallout, but there is a general understanding that it was linked to a promise or an understanding between President Kenyatta and William Ruto that when they came together in what was to some extent a marriage of convenience to contest for the elections in 2013 and in 2017, that Kenyatta would repay the favor by supporting Ruto when he was contesting for the presidency following the end of Kenyatta's second term. Of course, with the handshake and with Kenyatta's public backing of Odinga and of the BBI initiative that emerged from that, we have seen that promise, whether it was made, has not been fulfilled. And so Ruto, in his own ambitions to ascend to the presidency, split off from Kenyatta, distanced himself from cabinet meetings, and ended up leaving the party that they formed together.
Jacky, William Ruto describes himself as a hustler, and he has cast this race as a contest between hustlers and dynasties. So what does he mean when he uses the term hustler versus when he uses the term dynasty? And has this framing device that Ruto is using, has it caught on? Is it having a big impact in the election thus far in the campaigning?
Okay, for context, our current president was the son of our founding president, and Raila Odinga's father, the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, was one of Kenya's vice presidents. So they are considered dynasty by virtue of the fact that their fathers have held positions of power. And Ruto, rather, is claiming that he rose from being the son of a nobody. To where he is, that his claim is that he's self-made, he's come up, and that's, I guess, is his appeal and how he's trying to be more relatable to the masses. For Kenyans, for those who, honestly, because the majority of Kenyans live below the poverty line, so it's, if I could get here, you can get here. I'm the son of no one, and very many people can relate to that message. I think it has resonated with some people.
Fergus, what are the main issues that are separating the leading candidates this time out? What platforms are they running on?
So I would say that there has broadly been increasing convergence between the two candidates on key manifesto issues, but there are a few that separate them to some extent. One of them, I would say, is corruption, in that Raila Odinga has been campaigning on a very strong zero tolerance to corruption platform. That's one of his key messages throughout the campaign, whereas for Ruto, that's been less of a feature of his campaign, and he's chosen instead to emphasize the need for independence in the anti-corruption agencies in Kenya, and the need to depoliticize the fight against corruption in Kenya. There's also on debt, there's some divergence there in terms of Ruto is fairly sure that his campaign promises in broadening the tax base would allow Kenya to tackle its debt issues, whereas Odinga has promised to restructure and renegotiate some of the debt burden. I think there's also a general slight difference in terms of the focus of their campaign. So Odinga's being much more focused on social protection, on healthcare promises in particular, whereas Ruto has a real strong emphasis on this, on his economic model, which he calls bottom up, and on support to entrepreneurs in Kenya.
Jacky, it does seem that corruption is playing a major role in the campaign. season. How frustrated are voters with corruption in Kenya and with this, and do any of the leading candidates have credibility when it comes to pledges to tackle these issues and fight corruption?
I'd say Kenyans are quite frustrated. We have on average 2 to 3 major scandals a year, where the amounts are unthinkable for normal Kenyans. So yes, it's frustrating to majority of the electorate. I know it's a major issue as we go into the election period. And when it comes to both the candidates, here I mentioned I mentioned it yesterday, and I'll repeat it again, that many of the voters are a bit hesitant to believe any of the promises being made, because both the leading candidates in this election have served in previous governments, have held positions of power, have held positions of influence, and there hasn't been felt to be much traction or much change from them being in those positions. So I think there's hesitancy to believe them, and I think there's a greater focus on their other promises more than corruption.
Fergus, I saw you nodding along to some of what Jacky was saying. Did you want to jump in?
I would echo what Jacky is saying, that corruption has probably been supplanted by broader economic issues as a key campaigning topic in this election campaign. But I would say that on your question around the anti-corruption stances of key figures, that Martha Karua, the deputy presidential candidate as part of Odinga's campaign, is seen as someone with reasonable integrity when it comes to the anti-corruption issue. She's popular with civil society in Kenya as it relates to this issue.
Jacky, Raila Odinga nominated Martha Karua as his running mate. She's a longtime politician, former justice minister. She's the first woman to be nominated as a running mate on a major political ticket. Has this choice energized the electorate, and has it given Raila Odinga's campaign a boost?
I would say it has, because she's never been seen as a front runner in terms of on the presidential platform on a national base or other. She'd never managed to garner that much support by herself. However, Martha Karua is a force, and having a woman who has been seen fighting for different causes through the 90s, the early 2000s, the 2010s, she's been very instrumental in a number of things, and I think it has bolstered his campaign. I think it's won him some confidence, and I just want to see. I'm trying not to go too much into individuals, but I do think it was a good choice.
And Jacky, have the political reforms that were introduced after the election violence in 2007, have those political reforms made it easier for women and even for youth to participate in the political process?
Definitely. I'd say the new constitution, actually, 2010, has made it a lot easier for women and youth, because there's a program called AGPO, under which women and youth get 30% of government, at least government business contracts, 30% are reserved for women and youth. And I think this has increased access to capital and funds for those two groups, the women and the youth. And capital, at the end of the day, elections is about money. And if they have access to money, then you can move voters, you can make yourself visible. So I think this has greatly changed things. And also the one-third gender role. There are more political offices that women can go for, like the women rep. That wasn't there before. So I think that definitely we're not where we were in 2007. And I, for one, I'm happy for that.
Fergus, women make up nearly half of registered voters in Kenya, but compared to other countries in East Africa, Kenya still has few female elected leaders. From your perspective, why is that? And are there signs that things might play out differently this election cycle?
Well, I think partly it comes back a little bit to what Jacky was saying just now about the role of money in Kenyan elections. I think there had been a clear effort this time to pass campaign financing laws that would have increased transparency and introduced spending limits for the campaigns. Those didn't eventually end up passing, and so, you know, we have seen kind of unchecked spending by candidates, which again does make it difficult for slightly more marginalized groups to enter into the political process. I think as well, looking at the number of candidates who are contesting this time, out of, I think, around 16,000 total candidates, only about 12% of those are actually women. So there's clearly a long way to go on this front in order to achieve better gender representation in kind of senior Kenyan politics.
Jacky, what about the youth in this election cycle? How invested are they? Are they more apathetic? Are they more energized? And how much has the use of social media changed the campaign thus far?
I'll say, I think there's greater apathy amongst people who voted previously. The new voters are more excited. I think they're more plugged in. I recently saw Martha Karua opened a TikTok account, and I've been seeing whoever runs the account is doing a good job in engaging with the youth on it, and I can see some other questions are arising from that engagement. Twitter, I'll say Twitter has been a great tool for different candidates to address issues, and I can't compare the social media penetration that's there this time to, let's say, 2013. I think to 2017, there was a level of it, but I felt there was a lot of interference in 2017. 2022 feels a lot more organic, at least from what I've been able to witness lately. So for the youth, I think they're more plugged in. They're asking more questions. I know I've seen a number of skits being run by Gen Z on what it feels like to be in a presidential debate, how they'd respond to different issues. And I've been quite impressed just seeing the uptake. I think the first-time voters, the youth, those are the ones to watch out for. I think they may change everything.
Fergus, Kenya is East Africa's economic hub. How important is it to the region that during this election and after this election, things remain calm and stable?
I think it's really significant, not just in terms of Kenya's economic role, which is obviously significant, especially for the landlocked countries in the East Africa region, but also in terms of the benchmark that it would set for democracy. I mean, Kenya is the only country in East Africa to have overseen a relatively stable transition of power between government and opposition. And when you look at the current situation in Tanzania or Uganda, for example, where the context has been really difficult for opposition parties to operate, I think Kenya leading the way in terms of stable transition is really important. Also, when you look, for example, at the 2017 annulment, the precedent that set for the rest of the region and internationally was really significant. And we already saw in Malawi in 2020 a similar annulment of a presidential result, which cited the 2017 Kenya ruling as a precedent. So Kenya really has the potential to lead on this within the region and to act as a benchmark.
Jacky, from your vantage point there in Nairobi, what's the earliest you think that official results would be announced?
I think Friday.
All right. Well, it will be very eventful and interesting to see how it all plays out in the end. That's all the time we have for today, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to our guests, Fergus, Kell, and Jacky Kwonyike. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Mohammed, Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.